I just try to find out.
All right, everyone, if we can have everybody take their seats, it's 10 o'clock. So welcome everyone to the latest installment of the Informational Commission meeting. Again, for those of you who are joining us for the first time on one of these, because we don't have a quorum of members, because we don't have a quorum of actually appointed commission members, we can't hold formal meetings at this point in time. Which means while there is an agenda that was sent out, there's no way for us to approve this agenda. There's no way for us to formally call anything to order, to vote on anything, or take any action as a commission. That being said, what our intent is to still carry on and make sure that information is being conveyed to the serving commission members and to the public at large. As such, we will not be taking any votes, and the proposed agenda simply serves as a basic outline for the sort of topics that we're going to be touching on, so it'll be a little bit less formal than that. We will go ahead, since we are having this informational meeting, and have our meeting state read, and I will call on Commissioner to do that, please.
A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the November 21st, 2019 Informational Commission meeting was distributed November 19th, 2019 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistants, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Thank you. Skipping ahead along the not agenda, but sort of topics, one of the things we always like to know is who's here. So if we can go ahead and have an introduction of guests, and I will start on our front right. Susan.
Susan Beth, DDSN.
Robert Bernie, DDSN.
Mayor, DDSN. Chris Clark, DDSN.
Karen Carter, State Treasurer's Office.
Darrell Gatson with Protection Advocacy.
Deborah Heather Person.
Rufus Brett, DDSN.
Lori Davis, CDSN.
Ben Hart, DDSN.
Melissa Ritter, DSN.
Ann Dalton, DDSN.
Stephen Jones, DDSN.
Dorothy Goodman, Community Options.
Lindsay Daniel, Community Options.
Beth Feinke, Bright Start.
Susan Davis.
Deborah Leopard, DSN.
Deborah Wilson, DDSN.
Joyce Cameron, DSN.
Mike Mullins, Calhoun County.
Stephanie Williams, Calhoun County.
George, backup.
Bob Jones, Newberry County.
Arlington County DSN Board.
Patrick, the Center for Neurodevelopment. Michelle Sheffer, Flexibilities.
Sharon McKnight, Flexibility.
Brian Denny, South Carolina.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate that. Again, I've noticed that somehow the DDSN people have sort of started occupying the rows. They all.
Just so to get to the mic.
Yeah, just for the mic.
Okay, all right. You're not trying to be the teacher's pet. We did not have anyone sign up for public input, so we will skip past that. And is there any updates from the commissioners at this time? Yes.
So last week, I attended the Directors Forum Annual Conference of National Association of State Directors and Development Disability Services in DC, and kind of learned a lot about innovative programs and technologies that better serve individuals with disabilities. So it was a nice conference that is annual and something that Mary goes to. I also had the Witten Center parent group and the Jericho program for the School of Southern Wesleyan College come and present in Greenville during a Greenville Can Lunch and Learn, so that people, providers in the community could learn more about these two programs and be more aware of services and options that DDSN oversees in the community. So that was in Greenville last Thursday. And then I also recently met with Drive Up State's Executive Director Tyler Rex to learn a little bit more about some organizational changes that they're making to kind of more efficiently run some of their programs and align money with the folks that serve their different programs that they run. So, and then I know in our last commission meeting, we forgot to mention that we went to the York County Coffee Roasters and really learned about the program that they have there, the business that they're operating to help people with individuals with disabilities learn value, skill set in coffee roasting. So those are my updates.
Although the commission as a whole is unable to meet, we are still actively working with our subcommittees, and at this time we move to some updates with regard to that. I would call on Commissioner Unum to give us an update with regard to the legislative.
The legislative committee met last month and reviewed in line-by-line fashion the proposed new regulations that staff put together. We had an extensive meeting and made a number of suggested changes. Those regulations are scheduled to be published in the State Register tomorrow. And so the public is welcome to submit written comments anytime from tomorrow through December 30th. After which, Gary, you can take over from there.
Well, we have a public hearing that is set for January 3rd is our public meeting date. And we will be holding a public meeting for anyone who wants to come and give input as part of that process.
And all that information is in the state register.
Thank you, Rob. The next update I would recognize Commissioner Blackwood, with regard to the Finance and Audit Committee.
Okay. So we met on November 7th. The commissioners met with DDSN personnel to kind of look at some issues related to finance. And one of the items that we discussed was the amendments for some budget release to the Pickens County DSN Board, Jasper County Board of DSN, and Charles Lee Center. These money that was needed to be paid to serve the individuals that these boards serve in the community was over $200,000. So we had to look at that and talk through those spending requests. And after reviewing those, we, as a subcommittee, approved that the release of that money. And we can't vote on it here today because we don't have a quorum, and so we'll have to ratify those amounts in future. So the other item that we talked about in this meeting, the subcommittee meeting, was we talked about the HHS case management and early intervention rate increase, the 2020 rate increase. Basically, we determined that there was a few options that we have on the table regarding this issue. HHS has to make their final rate increase decision. We cannot commit to anything until they do that. So our options, as we discussed during the subcommittee, was if HHS rate increases are approved, then we'll take additional state funds for a period prior to the effective date of increased rate and equitable distribute to providers with EI and CM operations. This would be only 30% of the funds that they need to pay the increases. Second option, if HHS does not approve the rate increase at all, take state funds and equitably distribute to providers with EI and CM operations. This would have to be done annually since this is a permanent cost increase. Another option would be to earn the state funds for a period of time that HHS does not approve decreased rates, portion of the year, a full year of state funding. And then we would have to do this every year unless we were told to keep the money and use it elsewhere, or if it's just our base allocation of state funds. And then the fourth option was locate additional DDSN funds to fully fund the pay increase without HHS participation. So as you can see, there's, it's a complicated issue, and we were just kind of discussing in our subcommittee various options regarding the rate increase. And so when Chris comes up, he might talk a little bit more about that if some additional, discussion needs to be had. But that was pretty much what we talked about, pressing issues that we needed to talk about in the subcommittee meeting. And I think that was the main things I wanted to.
Thank you, Commissioner Blackwood. Moving on, I would recognize Karen Crichton, who introduced herself just a moment ago, with regard to a presentation about the Palmetto Able program.
Okay, thank you. All right. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm usually not accused of being very quiet. You can ask my husband that for sure. Now, is this? Today, I'm going to talk to you about the Palmetto Able Savings Program. I am the program manager, and I work for the State Treasurer's Office. This photograph was taken 2 years ago, the day we had our launch.
Yeah, we're
I'm sorry.
broadcasting, so I need you by that microphone.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We just need to pick that up.
That's fine, I apologize. I just keep turning my back to anybody, so y'all just excuse me. My name is Karen Kreider, and I'm the program manager for the Palmetto Able Savings Program, and I work with the State Treasurer's Office. This photograph was taken 2 years ago on the day of our launch, and you may recognize Commissioner Unum, who was one of our featured speakers there with her son Ryan, and she's standing next to Treasurer Loftus. First, we'll talk a little bit about the Federal ABLE Act, and I'm assuming a lot of folks in here are familiar with it. The way this began, it was an idea among parents of children with Down syndrome. It was the National Down Syndrome Society that really had the frustration and the desire to challenge that $2,000 resource or asset limitation for individuals with disabilities, which prevented them from saving for the future of their children who needed their help the most. It was a 10-year effort and included many national and local cross-disability organizations, and President Obama signed it into law in 2014. And what this did was amend the federal tax code to add Section 529A, which are tax-advantaged savings and investment accounts that may be used for qualified disability expenses. Assets in an ABLE account do not affect eligibility for benefits programs such as Supplemental Security Income, SSI, or Medicaid. Now, the other part of the ABLE Act is that it allowed states to offer qualified ABLE programs to their citizens. And the Palmetto ABLE Savings Program was established in response to this federal legislation. Our program was signed into law in 2016, and it is administered by the State Treasurer's Office. We did open for enrollment on November 17th, 2017, and I'm very happy to say that right now we have well over 1,000 accounts open. And South Carolina, we just saw some national numbers, actually has the 15th largest ABLE program in the country. So we are doing very well for our state. Our program is offered to South Carolinians through the Ohio Stable Program, through their State Treasurer's Office, and Ohio has the largest and most used ABLE program in the country. Now, there are eligibility requirements to own an account. One of the first being the age of the disability onset prior to age 26. Additionally, to participate in our program, you must be a resident of South Carolina, plus have one of the following: either be eligible to receive SSI or SSDI due to a disability, or have a condition on the Social Security Administration's Compassionate Allowances Conditions list, or have a medical diagnosis from a doctor and self-certify, which we'll talk about on the next slide. And it's important to note that an individual does not have to receive benefits to be eligible. Now, the self-certification process, what this does is an individual needs a diagnosis of a physical or mental impairment that causes marked and severe functional limitations. And these would be conditions that are listed frequently in the Social Security Administration's Blue Book. They would also attest that the condition has lasted or
will last for at least 1 year. And they would need to keep a written diagnosis of their condition for their files at home. It would be from the doctor, it would state the onset of the disability. You don't send it in to us, the program, we don't want anybody's personal health information. But that's what the self-certification process is all about. And a lot of conditions, including autism, will fall under that umbrella. About 16% of the people that participate in our program do self-certify. Now, these are some examples of what account owners may look like. First, we have Andy, number 1, who was born with Down syndrome. He's 30 years old, receives SSI and Medicaid. Would he be eligible? Yes, he would, because he was born with Down syndrome. Next, we have William, who's a 26-year-old military veteran. He was injured in combat just after his 25th birthday, and he was discharged, received a medical discharge from the military. Would he be eligible? Yes, because his disability occurred prior to his 26th birthday. Then we have Tom, who unfortunately or tragically had a motorcycle accident when he was 26 years old, and now he's a person with paraplegia. Would he be eligible? No, because again, it was after the age of 26. And then the last example is Mary, who began having symptoms of a mental illness while she was just in her teens. She was diagnosed when she was 30 years old and is 50 years old now and receives SSI Medicaid. Do you think she would be eligible? Yes, she would, because her symptoms were present prior to the age of 26. Now, this is a good time to tell you that the ABLE Age Adjustment Act has been reintroduced in Congress, and we're hopeful that that will be able to go across the finish line and be passed this year, but we don't know. But I know that there's a lot of energy behind it, and we're very hopeful. If that act is passed, it will increase the age of eligibility to 46, which will open these accounts up to a lot of our military veterans and individuals who perhaps have incurred neck, spinal cord injuries, which sometimes tend to happen a little later in life. Now let's talk about some of the benefits of Palmetto ABLE accounts. Obviously, first and foremost, they don't affect eligibility for benefits. Before the act was passed, you could not have more than $2,000 in assets or risk losing your health care and other benefits. Today, after the legislation was passed, you can save well over $2,000 and maintain that eligibility. And that is critical for so many people. Another benefit is that it provides financial independence, and they are tax-advantaged accounts. With a Palmetto ABLE account, or all ABLE accounts, the account is owned by the individual with a disability. If you're familiar with 529 college savings accounts, in that case, as a parent, you may open an account, but the beneficiary would be your child or your grandchild. With an ABLE account, the owner and the beneficiary are one and the same. Now, these are tax-advantaged. There's no tax paid federally or on the state level so long as the funds are used on qualified disability expenses. And in South Carolina, taxpayers can deduct up to 100% of their contributions into an ABLE account from their South Carolina state income tax return. Now, there is a consideration that people need to keep in mind, and that's regarding Social Security SSI. First off, balances over $100,000 do count as a resource. SSI is simply suspended, not terminated. And what's happening is once a month, all the national ABLE program administrators are bumping databases with SSA, and they're identifying accounts that have surpassed $100,000. If that individual receives benefits, they would suspend. The important thing is they don't lose eligibility and they don't have to reapply. Once they spend below $100,000, their benefits resume. People say, why is it $100,000? I think what everybody needs to remember is that before, people had to have less than $2,000. So we're talking about a $98,000 increase, which really can be a game changer for many individuals. Another consideration for SSI is that people pull money out for a housing expenditure, and they hold it over from 1 month to the next. Those funds may count as a resource, so we tell people to pull it out to pay rent or for home improvements, pull it out the same month you're going to spend it. And finally, if a beneficiary is employed and they put their wages into their ABLE account, those wages still count as income. These accounts were intended to be asset shields. They are not income shields. Now let's look at what qualified disability expenses are. First, the expenses should relate to the disability, and it's very broadly written. And it would be anything that helps maintain or improve the health, the independence, and quality of life of the individual with a disability. There is no list that I could share with you saying this is approved and this is not. And it was intentionally written this way so that individuals and families could use the funds to best benefit the account owner, the beneficiary, because the needs for my family may be different from yours. And that's the whole intention here. But some examples are things like housing and rent, which would include utility bills, home improvement, basic living expenses, which would include food and clothing, even getting your hair done, transportation, whether you're modifying a vehicle to accommodate a wheelchair or have to use rental cars or a service like Uber or Lyft, education, whether it's for tutoring, tuition, books, dormitories, things like that. Assistive technology, of course, is big. Everything from adaptive keyboards to service animals would fall under that. Financial management, if someone doesn't know how to manage their account or needs help selecting their investment options, they can pay a financial advisor with funds in their ABLE account for that sort of advice. Health and wellness, of course, and legal fees, and really much, much more. So it's just a very, very broad list. But if there are qualified expenses, there must be non-qualified expenses as well. And these are things that are not going to relate to the disability of the individual and don't improve their health, well-being, and quality of life. The best examples I can give you for that are things like alcohol and tobacco. People may like to smoke, but we all know it's not good for you. So those would not be qualified expenses. The issue with this is if you spend money on non-qualified expenses, there may be consequences. First and foremost, it could affect your benefits because the amount of the expenditure may now be considered a countable resource for determining benefits, such as Medicaid and SSI. And there are tax penalties, which would be 10% penalty plus 10% of the earnings portion of the withdrawal. So, and just so y'all know, we are working very closely with the Social Security Administration. We have been making presentations to some of their field offices around the state to make sure they're familiar with these accounts and know how they can work to benefit the clients that come in, because they do have POMS policy written on this, but it helps. It's been very helpful for us to sit and talk face to face to the group so they have a better understanding of these accounts. Now, in terms of enrollment, it's a very simple process. It can be done either by the individual with a disability, who is the beneficiary, or an authorized legal representative. Now, this could be a parent, a guardian, or someone who has power of attorney. And a parent can open an account for their child regardless of their child's age. I am the ALR for my son's account. He could probably manage it, but he just doesn't want to do it. So that's my responsibility. This entire process is done online. It's quick, it's easy, as long as you have all your information, including social security numbers, bank account numbers if you want to do electronic deposits. It takes about 20 minutes at the most. And it requires a $50 minimum opening deposit. Now, this money belongs to the account owner. It does not go to the state. In fact, the state does not make any money off of the ABLE program. And you are right now limited to one account per beneficiary, okay? Opening the account is very similar to setting up a bank account for online banking, which I think probably many of us have done. You go through the process, you will create security questions. We'll ask you questions about yourself. Are you the individual with a disability, or are you opening the account for someone else? And then tell us what the relationship is. We'll ask for the basics of eligibility and the disability type. In South Carolina, I think 80% of our account owners receive either SSI or SSDI. And 80% of them also have either developmental or intellectual disabilities. That's our largest group of account owners. You also will have an opportunity to select your investment options. You can select how you want to make your contributions. You complete the application, and then you're getting your account number and can print out that information. And then you're able to fund the account. Now, if you open an account, which I think happens, sometimes they open it, they forget to fund it, or they forget to do the little micro deposit to make it go live. If you don't do that within 90 days, it will automatically close. But all you have to do is call the customer service center, and they will help walk you through the process to get it reactivated. And this is an example of what our website looks like. It's palmettoable.com. We have the big blue box on the left that says open an account, and also in the top bar. And once you click that, you just follow the pages as you go. The annual contribution limit for able accounts is tied to the federal gift tax exclusion. Currently, it's $15,000 per year from all sources combined. It could come from the beneficiary themselves, from parents, relatives, employers, it doesn't matter. If someone is employed, they may contribute up to an additional $12,140 into their account for $27,140 per year. And I do know the $15,000 a year is going to stay the same for 2020. That number is not increasing. Contributions for able accounts are counted on a calendar year. So if you're trying to put money in this year, do it before December 31st or on December 31st, because starting January 1st, it'll be a new calendar year, and you cannot exceed that $15,000 maximum. And our system is designed to automatically reject excess contributions, which makes it easy. Now, there are many ways to fund the account. Individual contributions by ACH or check. You can mail in a paper check. We do have rollovers that are allowed from existing 529 college savings plans or able accounts from other states. It's a very simple process, and we have paperwork to do this on our website under the resources section. Another feature we have is the e-gifting function, and this is where the beneficiary or the authorized representative would request contributions to the ABLE account by sending out emails to a group of people. And that will include a link that they can follow, and they will make the contribution directly to the beneficiary's account. And what this does, it avoids cash gifts, which can affect your benefits. And actually, the person that makes the contribution gets a tax benefit on their own South Carolina state tax income tax return. And we do have payroll deduction now. And this is a new feature in 2019. It's very easy once the account is open. You just follow the steps on the financial plan. It's kind of like setting up your paycheck if you go to your employer and you say, I want 50% in this account and 30% in this account and 20% here. What you would do is add just another bucket for the ABLE contributions, and that makes it seamless and painless and happens automatically every month. And we do have directions for that on our website. Now, in terms of investment options, we have Vanguard Life Strategy Mutual Funds, and these are very similar to what you would find if you own a 401k or a 403b account. We have options from aggressive to conservative. We also have one principal protected FDIC option, which is insured up to $250,000. And I can tell you a great deal of South Carolina's funds are invested in the FDIC insured option. You won't make a lot of money, but your funds will be protected. And we have a lot of information on our website on the investment options, just palmettoable.com. And there are fees with this, as there are with all financial accounts like this, $3.50 per month or $42 a year. And there's a small asset-based management fee of between 19% and 0.33%, depending on the options you select. Now, you put your money in there, how are you going to take it out? First, the good news is withdrawals are free, and there are no limits on how many times you can make a withdrawal. So you've got three ways to get your money. You can either transfer money electronically from your ABLE account into a regular checking or savings account, and then use your debit card or write a check from there. You can also request a third-party check. So if someone has a standing expense, whether it's for rent or a mortgage or car payments, whatever, they can electronically request that a check be sent on a certain day of the month to the recipient. And you'll also have a paper trail with that. And the third way is that we have a loadable debit card, which I'll talk about on the next slide. It's important to note that the state will never ask you how the money is being spent, but the benefits agencies and the IRS may. So we always encourage people to keep good records of their expenditures. Now, the stable debit card is a loadable card, and you can easily transfer funds onto this. The important thing here, and we really feel this is a very strong protection, is it doesn't pull funds directly from your account. You can only spend what you loaded onto the card. So people can't just go out and deplete their accounts in a day unless they have to load all the money on it. There are no overdraft fees, because if you don't have it on the card, you can't spend it. You also don't have access to ATMs or cash machines. And you can limit the merchants. As a parent, if you know that your child likes to spend way too much money on this side or that side, you can has that block, so if they have their own card, they won't be able to access that as a protection. We also have an online portal that allows users to track and make notations about their expenses so they can keep those records. And we have a new feature that was introduced this summer that allows people to upload copies of their receipts in order to track their expenses. So we try to make it easy, and today with everything being so electronically, even people my age can upload and keep track of those records. So that's a good thing. Now, one question we are frequently asked is about ABLE accounts and special needs trust. And it's like, if I have a special needs trust, do I need an ABLE account? Or if I have an ABLE account, why would I need a trust? And our feeling is that these are complementary resources that work together to benefit the individual with a disability. Working with the trust can accept unlimited cash and assets. You can't put unlimited cash and assets all at once into an ABLE account. And an existing trust can be amended through the courts to include Palmetto ABLE accounts as a qualified distribution from the trust. And if you're creating a new account, you can include that language in it to avoid having to amend it in the future. Now, in terms of what the benefits are of an ABLE account, for one thing, it's very easy to enroll. It's free. It can cost several $1,000s to set up a trust. You have easy access to those funds. You have a much broader spending latitude in terms of what you need to use your money for. You've got potential tax benefits, and there's no federal or state tax on the earnings, and you have the use of a loan spend card. And if you have money in your ABLE account and feel the need to set up a special needs trust, you can use the funds in the ABLE account to set up that trust. So these, we think, are just very important tools and resources for families. Medicaid lien is always kind of a hot button with everybody. The bottom line is that Medicaid can ask for payback in some cases, but there are protections associated with an ABLE account. First off, there are limitations, and the payback is only from the date the account was open and that individual received benefits. They have to have overlap. So if an individual had received Medicaid benefits for 30 years, opens their ABLE account and passes away 2 years later, only that 2-year period would be subject to Medicaid lien. Okay, so it's not the entire history, just that period. You can also deduct any Medicaid buy-in premiums that were paid. If an individual has any outstanding bills for qualified disability expenses, those can be paid with the funds in the Palmetto ABLE account. And you can use the funds also to pay for funeral expenses. Unless somebody has pre-planned for funeral and burial expenses with a trust, once the individual is deceased, you can't use that money for that, but with an ABLE account, you can. And we actually just had our first account owner pass away very unexpectedly, and they're working through that process right now. So what happens here? Account owner passes away. It may be subject to Medicaid lien. There is no designated transfer upon death of the individual. What they would do is notify Ohio, contact our call center, and let them know that so-and-so has passed away. They'll be required to send in a copy of the death certificate. In the meantime, the authorized legal representative will be responsible for managing the account, and the assets will be distributed according to the individual's will, if they have one. Now, if someone doesn't have a will, then the account assets will go through the normal probate process in the state of South Carolina and be treated as part of the estate. So we like to say if people have $10,000 more in their account, it's a good time to think about having a will and making those plans for the individual. And the bottom line is we are here to help. We have our website, which is palmettoable.com. It's got a tremendous amount of information on it. We have an 800 number, 1-800-439-1693. That's open Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. I call them frequently myself. I get asked questions sometimes. I don't know the answer. Don't like to admit that, but sometimes I can get stumped. And I will call them and ask for advice. And you can also email them at team@stableaccount.com. It typically will take 48 business hours to get a response for email. Okay. And then what we ask of you is to help us spread the word. You can find us on Facebook. We're on Treasurer Loftus's Facebook page, and we also are on Instagram. And I always like to show this slide. This is Kurt Garrett, who lives in Lawrence County, And he was at our very first ABLE training. And he actually is the IT manager for Lawrence County DSMB. And what he said was that a Palmetto ABLE savings account levels the playing field, not only for me, but for so many others with disabilities. It allows us to plan and save for the future without penalizing the benefits programs we need to assist us. And in a nutshell, that's the benefit and the beauty of these accounts, and that's what they can do for individuals with disabilities. So, and again, this is our closing information, and our lawyers like me to say, we don't provide legal financial advice. Keeps us honest, so we encourage people, if you've got questions, go talk to a financial planner or an attorney. We actually are meeting with the Bar Association of South Carolina in January, and are going to be providing information on this program. You know, if you work with a trust attorney, it's really important to know up front if they understand these accounts, because frankly, if somebody is not familiar with ABLE accounts and they are in that trust account space, I would be a little worried. So make sure people know what they're dealing with. So does anyone have any questions? Can I take questions?
Thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you.
Appreciate that. Really good information.
Thank you.
All righty, so the next item is a preview of the supported employment public service announcement. Recognize Deborah Lippard and Liz.
Piggybacking on the Palmetto ABLE, I love it because there are so many people that have been afraid to go to work because they know that there's that $2,000 that, and it's scary for families, so I love it. So I wrote my notes down because I love employment and you could be here all day and we don't want that. So as the first agency in South Carolina to embrace employment first, DDSN continues to make strides in supporting individuals to reach their dreams through employment. We're familiar with some of the benefits that individuals have through having work. Some of those benefits include it contributes to the individual's happiness. It provides an opportunity for them to make a real contribution. It increases their social capital, so they by nature make more friends and have more connections. It helps someone to build confidence and self-esteem. It also increases other individuals' perceptions about them. And of course, it rewards them financially. Capable. Having the skill or ability or strength to do something. Or achieving results. So knowing that, what are some of the benefits to employers by hiring people that have disabilities? Most employers of people with disabilities report high work quality and rank their employees with disabilities as good or very good on quality, motivation, engagement, integration with other coworkers. Companies see an increase in their consumer market and revenue. Research shows that consumers prefer to purchase from companies that include everyone in their workforce. It can improve the company's staff morale and their corporate culture. Companies that hire people with disabilities often hire highly motivated people and find that inclusion leads to an increased positive workforce. It can help reduce employee turnover. Studies show that people with disabilities are less likely than others to make a job change, less likely to call in sick, and generally stay on the job longer. They often find there are government initiatives in the form of tax incentives to assist in the additional time needed for training or supports. And lastly, they can find this as a very positive strategy to increase their hiring pool. And we hear that, I know, a lot on the news. Finding motivated and productive workers can be a challenge. So hiring people with disabilities may be the answer to a shortage in workers. Research indicates that once someone is in the right job, people with disabilities perform as well as other employees.
That was Susan Davis, by the way, not Lynn Sagan.
I'm in disguise today.
Yeah. we made a switch on you. And I'm Deborah Leopard, I'm the Director of Contracts here at GDSN, but I also have about 45 years of experience in film, theater, Lori knows, and acting. So when Mary had this idea to do a PSA, I volunteered, and I'm really excited that I got involved in it because it's been a really wonderful experience. We wanted to promote supported employment and break through some stereotypes for what our people can do. So we thought about that, and we had Susan and Lynn came up with a list of people that are working in this state in different types of jobs, maybe outside of what most people would think, just some different types of jobs. Then we got together with the providers, the supported employment specialists, the consumers, and their employers to find times that we could go film them, which was challenging, but we got it done. It was really a great experience. I contacted a friend of mine who I'm actually making a movie with right now named Collins White, who is a cinematographer and is so talented. So we were very blessed to have him come in and film. He has all his own equipment, and we went around the state, filmed, and then he edited it. This is a 60-second version. Our plan is to do a shorter version to be shown on TV as a PSA and a longer version to put on our website. I thought you had a question. I was like, okay. Put on our website, and the folks that we're going to show you today, that's a small group. There's a lot more of them. Once we get the website video up, you'll be able to see all of them. He said he should be able to wrap that up soon and get that available. Rob and I went to see several of these consumers in their jobs, and the thing that struck me is how proud they were of their job and how happy they were, how grateful they were. And so we all need to kind of take that as a lesson, that to be grateful and be happy and be proud of our jobs, right? All right, so what we're going to show you is a preview of the 60-second. And it makes most people choke up a little bit. Enjoy.
Don't tell me what I can't do. Let me show you what I can do.
Don't tell me what I can't do. Let me show you what I can.
Tell me what I can't do, but let me show you what I can do.
Please don't ever tell me what I can't do. Instead, allow me to show you what I can do.
Don't tell me what I can't do. Let me show you what I can do.
Do not tell me like this. I can't do this.
Don't tell me what I can't do. Let me show you what I can do.
Try.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for also volunteering to take on that task. And the results show that you enjoyed that. All right, moving on to some updates on some old business. First, recognize Lori Manis for an update on case management.
That's going to be tough to follow. You guys did a great job on that. I'm here to talk to you guys just to give you an update on where we are with the implementation of waiver case management. We've been doing this for a while now. As you're aware, we implemented on July 1 of 2019 because the Department of Health and Human Services made the decision to move from Medicaid targeted case management to waiver case management for people in DDSN waivers. That implementation increased contacts basically by doubling them so that we now are required to have monthly contact, quarterly face-to-face, and face-to-face in the home with waiver participants at least every 6 months. They also allow for waiver case management to be billed when people are placed in hospitals, which was kind of a barrier with Medicaid targeted case management. The implementation started really long before April, but in April of 2019, distributed the standards, we asked for input, we revised those, got them approved by the policy committee on June 5th and by the full commission on June 20th. We did a big training blast the end of June, which was provided at 6 different locations statewide as well as Skyped, and we recorded those training sessions in order to prepare for implementation. We did a lot of technical assistance statewide as a build-up to the implementation of waiver case management, because we had a lot of providers that were billing at kind of very low rates. We also analyzed and simulated billing errors for the 3 months prior to implementation of retrospective payment in a fee-for-service world for case management. For the first 15 months that we were looking at the amount of revenue that would be generated by fee-for-service payment, we were issuing reports to providers that was comparing the amount that they would generate in fee-for-service to what they were receiving in their previous prospective payments for waiver case management. In August 2019, we made a shift in the way we report to providers to kind of give them an average revenue per consumer instead of giving them a percentage of what they would have gotten in the past, to help them account for revenue received for both waiver consumers and non-waiver consumers. Okay, so you guys have a copy of the monthly report in your packet, I believe, that shows you what that revenue was. In October of 2019, the average revenue per individual by category was $108.44 for people who are waiver participants, $83.69 for non-waiver case management people, which is kind of an average of $104.53. That amount was up a little from September. So in comparison, the average revenue per consumer in waiver case management was $55 when we started all this in May of 2018. So that's kind of a really good a really good basis for you guys to look at how much we've increased the amount of contact that's being documented in records for people that are receiving services. We do still have a few billing errors, and we are tracking Medicaid and eligibles for Medicaid services. Those are presented below. As you can see, the percentage of errors is still the highest in use of the wrong template. When we built the 2 services, we basically have a template for waiver people and a template for non-waiver people. And if a case manager chooses the wrong template, it gives them an error in their billing. The good news is they can correct that and be paid later. So I also wanted to just remind you that in all of this implementation, we've had 3 providers who have terminated their contracts with DDSN for case management. DSN Advocates terminated their contract on the end of May of 2019. Fairfield DSN Board transitioned all of their active case management cases to alternate providers. That actually happened on 7/1, right at the implementation. And then the Colleton DSN Board terminated their case management contract effective August 31st, and they've transitioned all of their active cases to alternate providers. We have not received any notification that other providers intend to terminate their contracts yet. There is a little bit of opportunity for increased revenue within the system for case management providers. Like I mentioned before, those errors that are made to the templates can be corrected, and then they're paid on the following month's invoice. So there's a way for that 4% error rate that's out there to be paid. And then we had 320 consumers who were enrolled in a DDSN waiver during the month of October that did not have a reportable service. So that's 2.7% of waiver people who should be having contact. The good news is that number's down from September, where it was 4.7%. But we continue to track that and try to notify providers when they're having problems with contact with folks. Do you guys have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Laura. All right, next item up will be the DDSN Holiday Market Square on Robin Furnish.
Thank you, and to piggyback onto to employment, Mary had asked us to look at a way that we could highlight some of the creative ways our providers, and not only our providers, but our individuals, consumers who start their own businesses, who kind of strike out, or creative types who want to see an opportunity and to strike out as an entrepreneur and offer that service to the public. And so in that vein, she asked us to look into the idea of having a holiday Christmas shopping type of market that you see, you know, around town. A lot of places do this, and we've had great response. We have right now 12 tables reserved for our holiday market on December 12th that we're going to have in conjunction with the December board meeting. And what we're going to do is we're going to invite not only folks that are here at the meeting and here in central office, but also surrounding agencies, DHEC, DMH, there's some large, Prisma Health, there's some large agencies around. We're going to invite the community to come and shop as well. Like I said, we have 12 tables reserved right now, running the gamut from coffee and baked goods to jewelry, handbags, Christmas cards, aromatics, and art. So there's going to be a wide variety of items and things available to purchase, and for everybody to look at and to see what creative ways these providers and these individuals are striking out on their own and doing entrepreneurial things. So the only thing I want to add to that is that we do have some room. Additionally, it'll be in this conference room next door primarily, and then down the hall, we're going to branch out down the hall here as well. And so you will see them as you come in for the December 12th meeting. And I can take an extra table or two today, but you gotta let me know today because we gotta set up. We got logistics and everything that we have to set up for the meeting. So if anybody else has items they wanna sell, any entrepreneurial activities they wanna take part in the holiday market, let me know today.
You know, I always drag a table out of the closet if you come. We'll do something.
All right.
Thank you, Robin. All right. Let's move on to the financial update.
Did issue a revised statement into a reclassification entry that was determined after we had emailed y'all the packet, so hopefully you've got that in front of you. Sandra passed that out prior to the meeting. Anyway, so we are continuing to work on our format for this to provide more and more information. We've made a couple tweaks this go around. Hopefully you'll recognize that we've added percent variances to the right so that you can, in the past that column didn't exist, and so you really didn't have a way of seeing where each funded program was in relation to the budget. We have 3 or 4 other things we're going to try to add to this as well as some additional reports that we hope to provide to y'all in the future as we move forward with trying to improve our reporting to the commission. First thing I would like to note is that if you look at the year-to-date actual expense column and go to the very bottom, you'll notice that our target percentage through 1 quarter would be 33.33%. Well, not 1 quarter, I'm sorry, 4 months. And we're at 31.62. So we're 1.72% below our spending plan. And the thing we want to do is, if you look at we have an authorization of $808 million, but we only have $770 million in our spending plan. We're going to take that $37 million difference, the funds that we have available to spend according to the state, in excess of our actual budget plan, and blow that out into the different funded programs so that you can see those line items adjusted for that $37 million. But we are still in a good position on our expenditures. We're running well below our budget. We still are fighting a revenue issue. We continue to work with HHS to try and address that. That's another part of the reporting I would like to start providing you as a revenue side. It's only the expenditures. The budget adjustment column is $10,941,000. That is us updating for the 2% pay plan and the fringes associated with that for not only our agency, but the provider network. The $600 bonus that was awarded to our certain employees within DDSN's regional centers and central office, as well as the Greenwood Genetics Center, $2 million that was awarded that was not in our original budget. And then FEMA generators and some earlier EIA funding that had to be added from our original budget to get to our adjusted budget. As far as the variances, I wanted to point out that our target percentage, as I stated, is 33.33%. So if you scan down and try and see what's running over, I want to try and address a couple of those. Overall, we're still pretty much a cash basis here, which what that means is if it goes through our bank account, we account for it. We don't have any concept of matching and coding things to proper accounting periods still. We're still working with the state to see what flexibility we have in doing those types of adjustments. So the reason I state that is we pay all of our providers a check in advance. So through the end of October, we had already given them half of their money for November. So that's in our expenditures, and that causes every single line item pretty much to be inflated artificially because we paid it out. As far as the HASKI, head and spinal cord injured community programs, it's at 37.5%. We have a practice of if an amendment is under $25,000, we go ahead and pay that in one lump sum to those providers for those contract amendments, and we had a bunch of those for the HASKI special residential programs, totaling $220,000. So that's money we've shelled out for the entire year already through just 4 months. So that causes a portion of that excess. And then under the intellectual disabilities and community residence program, in there are the $424,000 for FEMA generators that y'all have approved, $150,000 that we paid for LLR for their licensing of our facilities, and then $379,000 that we have to transfer to the Department of Social Services in accordance with Proviso 117.54. That's an annual thing, and they actually tell us how much we have to transfer by the end of September. So that's contributing to that excess. Those were the main points I wanted to make. I'll be glad to take questions if you have any. All right.
Next item up is the
Commercial report.
Draft commercial report. Draft.
What I'm gonna do is just provide you an overview. We've sent you the reports, but I have no expectation that you're gonna read those reports in the appendices. They're quite detailed and very, very tedious, financially oriented. So my goal here is just to give you an overview from which then we can ask questions and slowly understand what's in front of us. Recently, Department of HHS released 2 draft Mercer reports. In Mercer's review, they broke into 2 reports. The first report you see there can be deciphered as to it is their assessment of our rate payment study of what they project our rate ranges would be for fiscal year 19 and 20, as well as alternative options that HHS would consider going forward as far as our payment system. The second report you have there is very focused on our band payment system, and they critique it with 32 findings of issues, concerns, and most of them are deficiencies. Okay, still my clicker.
Sorry, Aaron.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All right.
I can just see.
There we go. So I'll do the first report, and I'll have the caption of the report that we're talking about. The first 8 slides pertain to the first report, the last 4 slides, the second report. This report is basically the rate study and the options for the future. To go right to the punchline, when you look at the rates and you aggregate the rate changes that they're draft rate changes, and I want to emphasize draft rate changes, because when you do a rate study, and I've looked at many across the country, it is a draft process where they come out with a proposal and they come out with their methodology. And part of that is the iterative process of agreeing of how that applies to us in a draft process of give and take, and I'll get to it in a minute. But their proposal, if you take the midpoint of all their rate changes, it is a 20% increase in the DDSN delivery system. Now that 20% is broken into 2 categories. One is direct rate increases. If you took their proposed midpoint rates, applied them to our rates, it would be a 14.2% increase. But what they also factor in is the rates that actually go up, they anticipate utilization going up, so they factor that in as well. So there is a distinction there between a static 20% versus the increased utilization. Now the devil's in the details. You can have an overall 20% increase, but the question is, where does this 20% fall? And to get our arms around it, let's just look at the 3 main areas of services we have. And I'll start with, let me start with residential. Residential, if you take the midpoint analysis of the individual residential rates, it is a 20% increase in the system. When we met with HHS, probably late August, September sometime, I don't think there's much disagreement that that is a number of which we agree upon. When we went to the day activity and employment estimates, the Mercer report has 50 to 60% decrease in the rates that are currently provided to DDSN. There was tremendous discussion about the methodology of which they built those rates. And I will say I'll speak on behalf of HHS, they were open to the draft process for the system to look at their methodology, which is part of the report. They set forth their methodology and rebuild those rates based on our data and our methodology and re-engage them as to coming up to a final rate. Mary, you're free to comment on that, but I don't sense any rigidity in this report, because when you look on the day program side, our position is that they're too low. Then when you go down to the last category, which is at home, generally at home, or we call them enhanced services, they appear to be generally too high. So the purpose of the draft is, and what we envision happening over the next months, is organizing our data, getting out the whiteboards, engaging the providers, and rebuilding these rates with our data and our experiences, and then we will get back with HHS in order to, because they ultimately have to decide on a rate. And so they're giving the balls in our court to take their methodology, reanalyze it with what we believe is reality, and meet with them and come to a rate, because we have to get to final rates.
Can I interrupt with a question?
Sure.
First, a very broad question to make sure I understand the significance of the Mercer report. This says residential services are estimated to increase by 20%. that means are estimated to increase by 20% if HHS adopts these proposed rates and the legislature funds them? I'm trying to understand what
Yes,
are
yes.
estimated to increase.
Yes, you first have to have the rate. If they took the midpoint and said, I'm adjusting all your rates from SLP twos down to CTH twos, it would change what they pay us by 20%. Well, that is their proposal. We can only raise those rates if we get legislative funding to do so.
Okay, it's a two-pronged approach.
Right.
And they might say, we don't accept that rate, because it's up to HHS to say that.
It is their rate, it is their rate, but at least they committed to, this is what Mercer proposed, what do you think on the rates? We think they're in the ballpark. They still haven't committed on that spectrum where they land, but the general discussion is they start at a midpoint, which would be the 20% rate. So they're still in this incremental deciding factor as to where they're going to land, but at least we have a framework to get there.
But they commissioned, HHS commissioned this study.
This is their rate, yes.
Okay, it's their report, and this is the results of that report, so it belongs to HHS.
I mean, at this point, they could decide to do nothing.
They could just chunk all this, it's not, just because a rate report comes in does not mean this is where you go. Right. Because there's so many other factors in here, plus to get an idea of how they came up with this stuff, the methodology, the assumptions they made. When we say we have problems with the day program rates, you can see the problems. And it was basically only on supervision levels as opposed, in the regulations. And it's a static level, which why the day program rate drops almost to 2/3. I mean, what does it drop by? I mean, that's not a survivable rate. That is, and it's not a good assumption that was made. So there's parts of this report that we can say, yeah, that makes sense, but other parts that say no. One of the great things is if you look at the case management rate, when we did that rate that many years ago, people were saying, well, you didn't add this and you didn't do that, and we were so in the ballpark. We were right on the money. It's not the highest rate, but look at what the low rate is. Look at the entry level rate. And we're right at midpoint. We're right where we should be, a little bit above, actually. So one of the things that we go through, and what my input was when we got the first part of the report, not the rates, I could look at those assumptions and tell you those day program rates were going to be bad, just by the way the report was written and said. Basically, what we did is we took a one-on-one rate and divided it by 10. And I'm like, I don't even want to look at what that rate's going to be. And that's basically what they did. So, but then on the other hand, the in-home supports, respite at 20, we can't do that. We won't have, we will never get a funding level that high. You know how hard it was to get the 1130. But we also backed into the rate to give a reasonable amount of administrative support to the provider, and then to be able to, bottom line, at least pay our caregivers $12 an hour when they're in the homes. So, because right now we have providers that are not paying anywhere near that, and we want to make sure we have a good level of caregiver. So
I think we should try for, if we got an outside independent report saying respite services need to increase by 100%.
I don't.
Legislature has $2 billion extra dollars.
Well, we can fight about that, but we're paying direct care support $13 an hour to work in the home.
Needs to go up too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wrong? Am I wrong? Isn't there a huge surplus this year?
They don't want extra money.
We need to fight for it. We need to fight for it where we've got an independent report saying.
A lot of people want it.
Yeah. I just don't agree with that number.
I think when you look at what's in front of us, the areas of agreement, residential, and some respite increase, which they have agreed to, is in our budget. So now when we go forward from our budget, it is not just our wish or thinking. This is a validated report of which parties agree upon. So it gives us a lot more support in the General Assembly to get residential rate increases and some respite increases.
And going back to direct support rate increase, from now on, the direct support rate increases are not coming from the General Assembly in a separate proviso. They have to be built into the rate. So when we're looking at our residential rates, they need to be including things like, we have to look at, what is the salary that needs for the next 2 years going to be? If we're looking at a rate, the rates have to have those COLA increases built into those. That's where you put the rate increases. So we don't end up with the same battle of these people are market rate, these people are bad rates, and we don't know how to pay. That's just, it should all be in the rate, including deferred maintenance, maintenance issues, transportation, all that's gotta be in there. So that's why those residential rates have jumped pretty significantly.
The short-term decisions that we talked about, finalizing rates are in front of us. I think the good news is, the reason they give them ranges is because when they do a rate study, what they want to do is give them a range, and HHS will pick a spot on that, and they tend to go to the midpoint. But what that does is, then for the next 3, 4, 5 years, they have an objective basis to increase rates without another big to-do. You follow me? It gives them latitude, and I think what we're trying to do as a state is, instead of having a rate and have it static for 5 years, and all of a sudden it loses its buying power, is to find that incrementalism along the way. And I sense that's what HHS is trying. So once we get in the starting gate, then I think we're in a better position on a rate-to-rate basis to increase each year without a major mathematical research production. Finding in the report was waiver service definitions should be enhanced for greater specificity as well as provider qualifications across all services. We've seen that in a number of areas. And basically what they're telling us to do is, you don't not only need to raise the rates, you need to be more clear on what your expectations are, and be more clear on what skill level you need to provide the services. And I think all we have to do is look at ourselves. I think we all tend to agree, we need to be more clear with providers as to what is expected. And this is still in the first report. So they kind of jump from the rates, which is very specific to us, as to, this is for them. They're thinking, what does HHS want to do in the future with our people we serve? Their first is fee for service. Their second model is develop a new managed care organization, whether they do it themselves, like they do their own waivers, or whether they bring in someone to do it as managed care. And the third option is take the existing managed care providers that are currently providing the bulk of their services for healthcare in the state and add this service to them, probably not unlike autism. So they're the three in front of us. And I'll open this to Mary. I'm very sensitive to like the future. I see nothing, they have not moved 1 inch toward, well, we want to go to managed care. What they will say is, at some future point in time, we will consider managed care, but I do not sense any rush to managed care. So I think that could cause a panic if people look at that, because managed care across the country in our population is starting to be rolled out, and you are starting to see reporting on that. And it is not very, there's a lot of friction around it, is probably the best way to put it. So that is nothing nobody wants to start without great thought. I don't see HHS running into that battlefield. It is a fee for service first. We got to get that first, because at the end of the day, managed care seems to be a very complicated process. It's not. Basically, we are managed care. They're getting, there are individual rates to providers, and under a managed care model, somebody comes in, what they're going to do is they're still going to pay fee for service to providers, but they're going to go back to the capitated model. But the difference between that capitated model and our capitated model is they actually have actuaries and the machinery to back up why they are providing these rates. And so I think that's the difference. This is the last two that, in short, these two, don't read them. It goes back to, we need an assessment tool that assesses our people for all their needs, so that it's done in a fair, balanced, and objective way, with the direction of ultimately being able to take the money we have and meet needs in the most objective fashion. And secondly, it gets back to the tiered rate model, which is, we call it acuity-based. And what you'll see in our system, in order to be fair to both consumers and the providers, we have to have a better payment system so that we can better classify our consumers' needs so that we pay providers accordingly based on needs. Because if you don't do that, what you end up happening, and you will see in the second report, the fact that we pay one rate, whether you have high acuity or low acuity, it incentivizes providers not to serve our consumers. And if people say it's not happening, I would disagree. It's happening. Hopefully it's at the margin, but that's the kind of thing that we have to address before it becomes broader.
In addition, that, we don't have that, we also don't have requirements based on the levels that we do pay now. So if you're getting a higher acuity rate, basically what we have, those low needs, middle needs, high needs, we are not saying your staff has to be trained in X, Y, and Z to work with this person. You have to have this number of staffing. If you're going to do this, this is what your nursing level should be. We don't have requirements for those. And so you've got some people get this amount of money and they still apply, this level of training and stuff for their staff. You have people getting this amount of money and they have this level of training. So basically we are not asking or expecting something for that money, which is extremely important that we do.
That's right, because your residential rates, equipment are acuity-based rates, but we have no policy to back up what's the difference in service level.
That's right. What do we do for that acuity?
Now we're on to the second report, and this will go much quicker. This report focuses strictly on the payment system, the traditional band system. It's pretty thick, and I don't think if you don't have a good history in bands, it will be overwhelming pretty quick. It's 40 pages long, it has 6 chapters. The first 5 chapters drag you through the details, come up with findings, and the 6th chapter gives you all the findings together. There's 32 findings, and you got to sum up the findings. It basically paints an unfavorable picture of the band payment system. And I will go back to summer of 18, we're in the middle of the House Oversight Committee, and we developed our own internal recommendations, of which the commission approved. And the number one issue that we identified at that time, which the commission agreed to, was the deficiencies of the band payment system have to be addressed, and we have to move. So none of this is a surprise to us. I think it just confirms what we've always looked at, but it's at least now there's a clear line in the sand to move forward, and I'll defer to Mary on this, but I see HHS not sitting on its heels to move forward. I feel like they really want to get on top of rates, going to providers, getting a contract, and moving forward at a rate that it's higher than I anticipated, and I appreciate their interest. I really sense that. Yes, ma'am.
Is whether to utilize the band system?
I think they have an agreement with us, and this is the history. If we made any major change, they would have to concur with it. But I think both parties concur, a major change has to take place. So I don't think there's any friction there. The question is, how do we do it so that we don't destabilize the system? And most other states, you're talking about a multi-year arc, so that whatever you do doesn't affect people's cash flows, so that providers can have predictability when they change from one to the other. And the best time to do that is when you have an increase in the system, because then all of a sudden it gets everybody a little bit healthier, a lot healthier. And when you do make changes, if there's unanticipated consequences, those that are most affected still aren't hurt and put out of business by change.
Can I say something? But technically right now, we already have 2 ways of being paid. We are paying in the band system. So the band system belongs to DDSN. We are reimbursed in a fee-for-service world. So HHS has that system already in place.
Yeah, that's true.
We're the ones that have chosen to distribute the funds in a different manner. So we're the ones that are paying that band system. So that decision to go and say we want these 2 things to be the same is really up to us. We can continue this, but it's become so quagmired as far as over the course of time, how we give money out, how we get reimbursed. That's probably the clearest part, is we know what we're getting in. It's how we're paying it out is where it gets very, very dicey. And
And we're only paying it out in the van payment system as to the, county board,
The
not as.
financial management, right.
That's right.
They're getting basically a fee for the service.
15% get fee for service retro, 85% get band payment. So we have this dual system already in place.
Right. So that's, when we say that at the beginning, when it first was designed, it was pretty clear. You can trace things back. But as you bring in more providers, as you change, we're serving more difficult people, as we just arbitrarily say, oh, we'll pay you for that, we'll pay you for that. Then you end up with so many different programs. It's better if you just have a tiered system based on individual's need, with an individual budget, clear. And I think that's what people want. We've been told by the oversight committees in the General Assembly, this is what you need to move to. And, this is something that some of the providers have been working for since 2012. That this is something just to get the clarity, just to see what's going on. But we're already in that dual system.
Yeah, and I think my question was, upon whose burden is it to pull the trigger? Like yours,
yeah.
Not DHHS.
Yeah, it would be the commission decision to do that, yes.
It's our decision. But to flop the system around, because of the way we split rates, we have to have an immediate administrative contract with them to cover our costs. So they've got to agree to this. So it's like we're all moving toward this finish line of, we'll stop splitting the rates if we get this. And, but ultimately, we're not going to do anything out the commission's approval, but I think we have pretty clear guidance to what direction to go in.
I didn't mean the
Yes,
commission versus
yeah,
staff.
yeah,
I
yeah.
get
No.
Okay.
If the legislature is going to criticize somebody a year from now because we're still in the ban payment system and the progress has been made, are they going to be criticizing DDSN or criticizing DHHS?
Well, I tell you one thing from this side, the battle rhythm is we need to change. And I think they're receptive. We sometimes forget that they're $10-11 billion organization. And as we get their attention, we got to hit it. And they agree with that. And so I think there is this culmination of, we just got to block our schedules out in the very near term and button this down. And so I think the concept, everybody's into it. It's the execution phase that we're in right now. I'm not going to even read these because it says the same thing. Transparency, talks about the need for a standard assessment tool. It talks about the need for getting your cost reports, getting your data right. It talks about all the things that we've talked about over time with the band payment system. Chapter 6, it goes right to the findings. But, it is clear as a bell that it is a system that is probably served us well when we were a simpler organization and we were suffering major problems in the late 90s with cost overruns. But once the system money dissipates and scarcity starts happening and complexity has overwhelmed us with all these patches, it is time to move to a different system. Any questions or?
Thank you, Pat. Now move on to our quarterly quality management.
Good morning. I have the quarterly incident for you in the standard format that you guys are used to. As you flip to your packets in your notebooks, I have information broken out for the regional centers, day services, and community residential programs. You guys should be familiar with the 5-year charts that show the trend history for the number of allegations that have been reported through our incident management system. The blue bars there on the chart represent the total number of allegations. The green bar represents standard of care findings or administrative findings from the Department of Social Services. And the orangish, reddish bar is for the number of arrests in a given fiscal year. So you have the 5-year trend report from fiscal year 15 through fiscal year 19. And then in a gradient sort of bar there, I have the fiscal year 20 data that's been annualized. And you'll notice that there has been quite a spike. I also have the 5-year average for you, to the right of that column, so that you can compare how the trends are going. When you see that there are 240 allegations for fiscal year 20, that is the annualized number. I'd like to provide you with some additional detail about that. We have to date had 49 individual reports of abuse, allegations of abuse, neglect, or exploitation in the regional centers. I'm sorry, that's 49 allegations of abuse. We've had, when you annualize this number, we've had 196 individualized reports. Keep in mind that one report can contain more than one allegation. There could be allegations of physical or psychological abuse together in one report. We have had 5 cases substantiated as standard of care or verified as standard of care findings by the Ombudsman's office, and we've actually had 2 arrests, 1 in each of 2 regional centers. Out of the reports that have been called into SLED, SLED has chosen not to vet 14 of them. So they didn't even rise to the level that SLED felt they needed to vet that allegation out to an investigative agency. 28 of the allegations were sent to the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman's office, and 7 were investigated by SLED, resulting in the 2 arrests. We are serving a more difficult population. I know you hear that over and over. But as an example, we have 2 people that are responsible for 12 of the allegations one of the months. So, you know, we've had an increase, but we're tracking it. Our regional centers are on top of the reports that they're receiving. They're having to come into the centers that were, they had to move from their community placements because they simply were not able to manage the behaviors.
Are you saying people as the source of the complaints, or 2 people who are the allegations made against them?
The allegations were made against them.
No, the allegations were made by. We had 2 individuals, we had 11 people put out at one of the regional centers.
Yes,
Because one person made all those allegations.
Okay, so
Yes, I'm sorry, yes. I misunderstood the question.
We have individuals who are making a lot of complaints as opposed to, we don't have individuals who are the focus of the complaint.
So one of the things that we want to make sure that when you see a spike, you have to ask yourself why. So one of the things we also do on a regular basis is we have the regional centers come into us and they bring all their employment actions. So we're sitting there looking at, oh my gosh, all these people were put out for an abuse and neglect allegation. Then we noticed that it was 11 of them from one center. And then we find out that there was only one person making the reports, a person who just moved from the community back to the center. And it's like, okay, let's delve into this a little more. Because sometimes it's not, you got to make sure that you are reading these things right, that it's not that there was 11 people, with reports. It is one person making a lot of allegations. So we got to see what his issue is to see what makes him comfortable and not comfortable. And it could be that no one's really doing it. It's his perception of what's going on. So we got to make sure that the reporting is accurate. But that is one of the reasons you keep this type of statistics, so you can see when something spikes, it's like, oh, okay, let's figure out what this is. The other thing we're thinking is there was an awful lot of reports not taken by SLED. They're taken for information only, they're not vetted to the ombudsman, they don't rise to the level of anything. However, people are reporting more. Is that because of the efforts being made now? We got a lot of walking around going on by managers, we got a lot of talking about this stuff. People might be more sensitive to the issue, so you're raising the number of reporting go. And the other thing this is telling us, a lot of this stuff Ed's got to tease out almost incident by incident, because our reporting system, the INS system, doesn't help us to tell the story. It just kind of lumps everything in together. So if I make an allegation and then, and we report it, SLED goes, we're not even going to look at that. And then we've got to go back and do an A&E report. So we're picking it up that way. It would be so much easier if we could kind of delineate those things out. So that's something we're trying to work with the computer system. And, we got the OIG in here looking at our information management system anyway. that might be a good leverage to say, I keep telling Ann, don't tell me what we have. Tell me what you want. Tell me what system we need. Because that way, then we find out how much that system costs and we go ask for it. Because another one of the issues we'd like to do is take those ER diagnostic codes and kind of back check the critical incidents and A&E reports. We heard this at our, the conference we went to. There is now a software that will allow you kind of plug those codes in and it pushes out what you should be looking at and if you should have reporting on those things on the other end of it. Instead of looking at all those thousands and thousands of codes, it'll allow us to kind of make it more manageable so we can say, again, I'm not really worried about the agencies who report a lot. I'm more worried about the agencies who report very little. It's like, are there things they should be reporting that we're not getting? So, you know, there's a lot of alternatives out there because this is new technology too, so it's kind of a good way to analyze this kind of data. Because when I see the number 240, I'm like, oh, what the heck? One, it's annualized, so I'm not sure that's going to be a legitimate number at the end of the year. But two, why? And then if I've got all those reports not being taken by SLED, how do you want that reported to you? In a separate line item, which I would prefer. But if it's so laborious, maybe we need to look at a new system that'll help pull that out for us too. So there's a lot of things going on here. Sorry to interrupt, but you know, this is my thing.
So as we look at the community residential information for the first quarter, again, we see a spike for fiscal year 20 in the first quarter. The 5-year trend is gradually increasing as we move along. The 5-year average for the number of allegations that have been made in the community is 521. If we look at the annualized data for the first quarter of this year, we're at 748, significantly above that 5-year average. But to put it in real terms, for real numbers for the actual quarter and what's been submitted, we have 187 allegations. That is from 132 actual reports that were called into SLED, 15 of which SLED chose not to vet to any state investigative agency. 8 went to DSS, 1 went to the Attorney General, 53 were vetted to local law enforcement, and I have 55 that were vetted to the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman for standard of care allegations. So that gives you an idea of how the allegations were broken out. For the first quarter, the number of allegations has been averaging 30 to 50% higher each month. But again, we're looking at more difficult people that are on the critical needs list, that are moving into residential placement. They may have a longer arc for stabilizing in their new setting. We're looking at staff turnover, staff training, what kinds of training are the staff getting, the makeup of the homes. There are so many different variables that can factor into, you know, what's going on and what's behind the actual trends. We have, on an annualized basis, we have 140 standard of care verified situations. The true number for the quarter is actually 35. And many of those are for injuries of unknown origin, just as they are for the regional center. If someone has a bruise, a scratch, and the staff are not able to account for how that happened, it is still reported as an allegation to rule out the possibility of abuse and neglect. We are always going to err on the side of caution. So there is an investigation to look at what happened to that person. And 9 out of 10 times, even after the ombudsman investigates, there's no explanation. It is determined to be an accident. The data for the day programs is actually going in the reverse direction. We have less allegations. There have been 12 allegations for the quarter. We've annualized that to be 48. We are tracking well below the 5-year average for day programs.
Yes, we are. They're going out more into, like group employment opportunities. We do. We have the number down.
So I know that typically the arrests are what captures your eye and what we want to spend time focused on. So we know that 47 of the allegations that were led were 4 allegations of physical abuse. We know there were 13 for exploitation and 4 for criminal neglect. When we have received the closure reports, we have actually a total of 9 arrests for the year. This chart represents community residential and day program arrest. There has been 1 arrest in a day program. When you look at the actions that caused the staff arrest, we have 2 people that were arrested, individual incidents, where there was fraudulent activity. Somehow they accessed the consumer's personal financial information, and they made transactions that impacted the consumer's money. There were 4 arrests where the staff had physical contact with the person supported. They pushed them, and they may have caused a bruise, but there was no substantial injury. There was 1 arrest for an individual that did have a substantial injury. This person and the staff member were horseplaying, scooping off, and the staff threw an object which ended up causing the person to have several stitches, and they were arrested for abuse of a vulnerable adult. We do have a new category with the reporting for fiscal year 20. Unfortunately, we have seen 3 cases of this nature. We have 1 arrest at this point, where direct support staff have posted information on social media, which may have included improper treatment of individuals or exposing them, their vulnerability to the public. I know that the Attorney General's office has prosecuted in other settings, actually under the Peak and Com laws. There's not anything that truly fits for social media at this point, but the staff person arrested in this case was charged with abuse of a vulnerable adult. And as I mentioned, there's also been the 1 arrest in day services for pushing an individual, but there was no substantial injury. So as I continue to move through the slides, and you do have this in your packets, there is a short description of each arrest that took place. You'll see that there were 2 in our community training home 2 settings, 2 in a CRCF, 1 in an SLP2, 1 in an ICF ID, 2 in the regional centers, and the 1 in day services. There is a brief description here that I just ran through for you. Please let me know if you have any questions. I will move on now to the critical incident trends. The chart that you have before you represents a 5-year trend for selected critical incident types. You may recall that in November of 2017, we implemented a change in the criteria for critical incident reporting. Our major medical, hospitalization, and other medically oriented criteria was actually shifted to THERAP, and we removed that from the critical incident. It was not, those were actions that were not caused by or an employee or an action of anyone employed by the agency. So here you see that details for aggression, choking, elopement, law enforcement restraint, sexual assault or aggression, and suicidal threats have been outlined. Our choking numbers are increasing. That is something that we are certainly tracking. Elopement is up, and the fiscal year 20 data is annualized. Our restraints are up, as well as the suicidal ideations. We have not had any actual suicides, but we do have quite a few people who have made threats of suicide. Many of the incidents that are reported here have been made by the same handful of people who have the suicidal ideations as a targeted behavior within their behavior support plan. But we still implement the same protocol whenever someone makes an allegation or a threat of suicide. You will notice for fiscal year 19 and 20, there are no reports for aggression and assault. Those reports are being captured through THERAP. We have seen an increase in the number of reports of aggression and assault coming through THERAP. We've also seen an increase in THERAP for law enforcement and with restraint. We're monitoring those numbers because I think that they are indicative of what's going on in our settings and the stress that our staff are under as they continue to try to deal with those behaviors.
We also are looking at our policies to make it even clearer so staff understand clearly what they're supposed to report and where they're supposed to report it, because there's still a little bit of murkiness in the definition, and we're not capturing all our restraints data where we need to. So we need to pick a place that needs to go in one place, whether we can report it on here, which is fine, but right now we don't think we're getting all the reporting, basically because of the huge amount of, we just have a drop-down menu of so many different things, and it's the direct support staff that's checking these off. So if they're not checking what we're collecting, then we got a problem. So we're in the process of revising that, the critical incident and the GER matrix. We're looking at that to simplify it for folks.
Right. And I know that you and I guess Michelle and Hester developed the draft of the critical incident revision.
It's not done.
And I was thinking that was going to be presented tomorrow with the quality
Not
management.
100% done.
Okay. And we have certainly talked about a revision to the A&E directive. We are working with SLED as they are looking at their internal policies and how they are vetting cases. They are taking more cases for information only and not vetting them. So we need to make some policy decisions on how we're going to handle those, as Mary indicated earlier. And we also need to account for the fact that SLED is individually referring standard of care violations to the state long-term care ombudsman's office. So if you have 4 people in a home and there's an allegation of neglect, they are turning that into 4 intakes for the ombudsman's office. So that is going to skew our numbers as we continue to move forward.
We also need to give you the total numbers of people in residential care so you can see if we've gone up.
Yes.
And the number of people we're serving, then the numbers probably will go up also.
Right.
As you said, Robin, if the number of people attending day program has gone down or the attendance is lower, not even who's attending, but when they're attending, the numbers are also going to decrease.
Sure.
So, it's statistics are.
If we look at the community residential setting, we do have that information broken out in a rate per 100. If you look at the colored handouts that you have that follow, there is a rate per 100 listed for community residential day and regional centers. For community residential, the rate per 100 on a 5-year average is 10.9. And we are currently tracking at 16.5. If you look at the actual numbers, it's 4.1. For the regional centers, the average is, right now we're tracking at 36.4. And the actual number based on the reports is 9.1 for this quarter. Are there any questions?
Take it.
And I say this every time we meet, until we have our new commission members, we continue to hold our public information, and I hope the information is useful to everybody. This allows us time to keep everybody in the loop, so we're not having a 24-hour January commission meeting. Get more of our information. All right. The commission members agreed that it was important to hold a finance and audit committee meeting monthly, which we greatly appreciate. That way you get another level of understanding, more so than you can just put in a 2-hour, 3-hour commission meeting. You need more. And so we appreciate that, and the staff is going to make the same request that the policy committee be a monthly set date type of meeting, so we have more timely review of our policies and they're not just stuck in a pipeline somewhere, that we know that they're constantly moving through and then we're getting the updates as we need them. The The Medical Affairs Subcommittee moved two commissioner names out of the committee to the full Senate last month. That was Barry Malphus from District 1 and David Thomas from District 3. Mr. Malphus' orientation, I began his orientation in midsummer, and it continues. And I've been in touch with Mr. Thomas to discuss the possible training dates for him. I sent out a matrix to staff yesterday and just put everybody's name down, the topics I think they need to cover, and for them to fill in any more blanks, and I will send it on to you all to see if there's additional topics you want to put, and then I'll place it with the person best give you that information. So you're not listening to, I know the voice is wonderful, but I know you don't want to hear it for hours and hours on it. So I think it's good if you hear from everybody, the subject matter experts on it. Let's see, the January commission meeting was moved to January 23rd. So the Senate would have an additional week to vote on confirmation so that we can have a full commission meeting on the 23rd here. And I would expect, I'll pack a little snack, break the truck. I expect that meeting to be just a smidge longer. This is just more information. And we have two new members who might ask more questions, which I would encourage them to do. Our budget presentation to the Senate Finance Subcommittee is on December 11th at 10 o'clock. And we continue to work with DHHS and Myers and Stockford CPA firm to finalize the 2017 cost report. The effort, and it's not that anybody's dragging their feet, what they're trying to do is make our administrative costs easier to identify in this report and to standardize things so that we're just not using spreadsheets all over the place to come up with our costs. And the work that is going into this one, it's not that the cost report isn't, it's done, it's just not finalized. So they're trying to work out all these little, make sure everything is accurately calculated. That's one of the big things, versus just setting up formulas in an Excel spreadsheet. At this point, the work slowed down for 27, it's just kind of slowing it down just a little bit, but we can reap the benefits of all that work because it'll speed up the 2013, 14, and 15 because we will have a standardized way of doing these cost reports. And also going forward, 18, 19, and on and on, we will actually have a standardized format to do the cost reports, which makes it so much easier and more reliable when the numbers are presented. So we'll have the framework established. Our planning day on the 28th in October, and I thank Robin and Commissioner Blackwell and Commissioner Lamel for attending. It was, the staff really appreciated that. We had a little strategy session outside of the office, and basically the positive strategy result out of that is a method to better track the multitude of projects. Because I would like to say that after a year, we're not finding anything anymore, but that would not be a true statement. We still continue to find some things that have to be corrected, and so this would allow us to have a better way to track all these projects and have everybody assign responsibility and then have them report back to us so we can stay on top of it. Because I'm not really in favor of just kind of catching that ball before it hits the floor. I mean, I really like to stay on top of things, and it's difficult to do when you keep getting things thrown at you. So this is, we want all the pertinent parties to stay inside that informational loop. And so basically, we just kind of had a big part of this is setting up a system to do that. We're actively engaged with 4 DSN boards at this moment, doing in-depth financial analysis and making recommendations to rectify areas causing them the financial loss. Much of it has to do with staffing patterns, and lack of systems to approve overtime. Now that we're receiving and reviewing timely financial information, we are identifying potential problems and interacting sooner, hoping of averting a financial crisis at the end of the year. In addition, after a financial analysis is done, if there are recommendations that require action, we are notifying the executive director as well as the board chair. We have learned our lesson from past experiences that frequently the board is not aware that the board of directors is not really fully aware of the extent of the financial problems. And we want to make sure we keep them in the loop too, since they are responsible for it. We have uncovered another historical issue that needs to be addressed. And the issue is with compliance recoupments, that's the Alliant reviews, which would be the R indicators in the Alliant reviews. I'm reporting this to you as a heads up because we this is like hot off the presses within the last 2 weeks. We've discovered this issue, and I don't have enough reliable or thorough information to present, but I just wanted you to know we're working on making sure that we're in compliance with recoupments to CMS, and how we are taking back our recoupments from the providers for services that don't meet the requirements. And let's see, Bob Jones, are you still here, Bob? I want to thank you publicly for being a wonderful host. We went a couple of weeks ago, he was our first trial at doing like a family meet and greet, and really asking the basic question, we've got an array of services on the waivers. Is there something on here that is missing? Is there something missing from this array? Is there something that would serve you better? You know, one of the things we talked about a lot is non-medical, non-emergency transportation, and not really, we're looking at it to tie, you gotta tie it to something. It can't just be, I wanna go to the movies and stuff. I mean, that's nice, but when we start something like this, you gotta start specifically, and we're looking at work related. Because people lose the job to get them because they don't have transportation to get there. And in a state that is so rural, we don't have a lot of public transportation in the state, so it's not a reasonable thing to say, well, just use public transportation. So we're looking at that. We know you get to doctor's appointments, we'd like to get you to the job too. So the one thing I took away from that is the families were very friendly and very open to talk. They like to talk. What I also noticed is that we still have a void in information to the families, pretty much to the person. They didn't know what waiver they were in, except for the Husky consumers. They pretty understood that. But between the CS and the IDR, the really sad part is there was one woman who didn't know she was in a waiver at all. And it's like, that is why we want those case managers to get out there and talk. And we understand. I was going to tell you, parents are busy. They're busy trying to pay the bills, get to doctor's appointments, deal with the issues that they're dealing with their child or their other loved one that's in the house. We need to, because we had some people care for brothers, a brother and a sister, to remind case managers just to slow down a minute. Repeat yourself. You get a chance to say it every single month. Maybe after that first 6 months, they're going to understand what waiver they're in and what services are available and what they can use and which might enhance, their lives. This poor woman first went to the day program, but she would take her everywhere she went. She wanted to go to a party coming up with just her friends, and she didn't really want to take her daughter with her. And she goes, well, I have no one to leave her with. Well, we can get you. I was saying you can get family support funds for respite. And Bob's piped up and he's going like, your daughter goes to the day program. She's got a funding source. She's in the IDRD waiver. So again, we need to make sure that people are saying this. And well, I don't want to be repetitious. Well, you know what? Sometimes you need to be repetitious on things so people get it. We want them to utilize their services. We went to the state directors conference. Robin was nice enough to accompany me. I'm glad she came. I don't know if this is comforting or scary, but when we sat around, we had a directors forum the day before the conference started, and we are not alone. Let's put it that way. So I don't know if it's comforting to know that states are dealing with the same problems, because we're always told, go find out what other states are doing. Well, I'm telling you, they're saying the same exact thing. Go find out what other states are doing. So the big problems we saw, are clearly the same for everybody. Payment system, they're all talking about payment system. They're all talking about rate setting. They're talking about incident management systems and how to provide the best oversight. They're talking about assessments for the individuals and how to use those to set rates. They are talking about waiver services and how transportation for work was up there. And how to get from compliance-driven reviews to outcome reviews. When we talk about those recoupments, it's some of the things I read, as a provider, the provider in my head explodes. When it says, well, we're gonna recoup this, you just wrote dental services. And it's supposed to be adult dental services, right? And I'm like, what is the outcome? He get his teeth cleaned. That's the outcome. So maybe CMS needs to come off of that wordsmithing so we can look at, did the person get their teeth or the cavity filled? That is the important outcome of this whole thing. Not what the name of it is on a plan, but that the person who needed to have their teeth cleaned got them done. So if the outcome's not met, then the recoupment comes. But if you got your teeth cleaned, why are we recouping for dental services that were obviously provided? So we got to look at the methodology to make sure that we're not looking at recoupment for things that should not be recouped. So that is why when I talk about thorough information, we got some research to do too. So that was, I don't know if it's, like I said, if it's scary or if it's comforting, but pretty much the same issues are constantly talked about. And the newest director there was the day before the conference was her start date. So I was not the newest person in the room, and actually I was one of the old people. So yeah, there you go. But that is basically my report.
I have a question for the tracking system. Pat was going to be working on tracking of how we're working on stuff. Essentially, I almost feel like we need something like that at our level. So as you're looking at that, I mean, right now we have old business, new business.
Right.
But there's always stuff out there that we say we want to revisit this in 3 months or 4 months. I feel like it would be very useful for us to have a similar tracking system for mission business. I don't know how the other commissioners do, but it always feels like that's always my big concern. Something, I have this archives file that every so often I look back here, you know what? We said we were going to revisit this in 6 months. I got to make sure that we do that.
It's a good idea.
The commission use like Smartsheet or Airtable, anything like that?
We can do that.
Right, yeah, we don't.
No, we don't. We can set that up for you.
And it's mostly dependent upon sort of the individual commissioner saying, hey, I remember 6 months ago, we said we wanted to revisit that. We need to put that back on. And I think it would be helpful as we're looking at that we have something.
Yeah,
for us.
We can do it for you, but I think what we're going towards, I think Kevin and his team are at training today for enterprise risk management. What we want to do is use internal audit like it should be, because they directly report to you. So what we do is if we can track ourselves, Kevin's going to come in and he should give you a report next year as to, hey, this is what management says his problems or risks are. He will concur to it or add to it or subtract to it. And then we have a baseline to work from. And then it's Kevin's job to report to you on how we're doing. Because that's how you get your that's how you cover your fiduciary duty, that we are addressing their issues. And so, that could be a tool, or you could have something, take ours and make it a little bit different. But I mean, I think the grand scheme here is you as the commission needs to use internal audit as your tool to make sure management is doing what we should be doing, so that you feel like you're not lost in the details.
Well, I agree with that, but I think we need something
Quicker for you guys.
Because it's not so much, Kevin's gonna be dealing with the risk that's in the
Right.
agency, the holes, the things that we're finding that should have been found a long time ago.
It's more the ongoing
That's
projects
exactly
we're talking
right.
about.
So if you could possibly go through your archives, so we don't miss anything you already have in there that's, kind of stuck in your craw a little bit, we could add those two, and then as we go through and report on things, if it doesn't end up in old business, we'll put it on that sheet so we can kind of do a cleanup every so often.
Yeah, that's
Of it. Okay, that's fine.
Do you have some kind of sheet that you guys use that's like online, we can access live as well? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do,
Just
yeah.
like a project management tool.
Right. We have
Chris knows all about that stuff.
We do have that.
He's pushing me into all that.
Yeah, we have deployed Smartsheet in finance, and we're in the process of looking at other usages throughout the organization.
He set one up for the January commission meeting, so we don't miss any of the things that we have to get in there.
Okay, that's.
Mine's on a sticky tab, his is on. There you go.
That's in this archive.
There you go. So if you could go through that, we'd really appreciate that. Anything else?
All right. So the next informational meeting is currently scheduled for December 12th. I would have everybody note that is slightly off from our normal schedule because the other commission members have graciously agreed to accommodate a vacation schedule that I have that week that would normally be our week. So we've scheduled that for December 12th, so it's a week earlier than what we would normally have. And is there any
perfect for the holiday market because it gives you an extra week to prepare for your Christmas shopping, your holiday shopping.
I think we are adjourned, closed, because we never